Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Global Women Enrichment Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we had some input from our audience in terms of what's the next topic we should be talking about. And really, the conversation was, hey, can you share some information with us about something that women sometimes are maybe very good at or may struggle with? And self-esteem is the topic that we've been asked to talk about today. And when we think about self-esteem, what is self-esteem, right? So self-esteem really is self-respect in who you are and your abilities, and it's also about not letting others try to define who you are or what you are. And so as we think about self-esteem, it brings several different things into play. It brings self-respect, self-awareness, and really the ability to delineate between what self-esteem is and what having this really high ego is all about, right? So we're not talking about ego. We're not talking about narcissism. We are talking about love for self. And so, Vinoria, what do you think about self-esteem?
I just knew I had to be the lucky one to go first.
Of course.
Yes, okay. Self-esteem, one of the things that I think that we can add to that list of having self-worth, knowing your self-worth. A lot of times we find that we tend to want to define others and their worth instead of looking inwardly at our own selves and see what our self-worth is. There are a lot of people, especially younger girls, that tend to suffer from self-esteem, and of course, guys too. But because we are focusing on women, I'm going to target young girls. And a lot of times they're feeling that way, especially when they're becoming teenagers.
Right.
Because their body at that time tends to change. And for some, it could be, in their mind, they could see it as a negative, and others versus a positive. Because especially when it comes to weight, the preteen years, or I should say the teen years, coming a teenager, your body change drastically.
Yes.
Okay? And you go through all type of different emotions. And you are just getting ready to go to high school. And kids can be mean, okay? And everybody's going to have an opinion about how you look and how you present yourself and all of that. But I just want to say to teenagers out there, and also to young adults, to anyone that's out there and that's listening to this podcast, know your worth and know that you are just a beautiful person because you were created in God's image. Don't let anyone define you. You define yourself. Okay? You tell yourself that, hey, you are bigger than this, you are better than this, and you can do anything that you set your mind to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, when you say that, it made me think of something that my mom says, to this day still says it. She says, when you wake up in the morning and you go to the bathroom and you're looking in the mirror, say, hello, beautiful, today is your day. And really reinforcing that you are perfect.
You are perfect. That's
and you are built in God's image.
Right. As you mentioned that about looking in the mirror, I remember, when Facebook first came, and I'm not a big Facebook person, but I remember one time I just went wild and I put a whole bunch of pictures and I posted. I took a whole bunch of pictures and I just posted them and made it like a little collage and all of that kind of stuff. And I wrote like I'm talking about myself.
Right.
Because all these pictures are about me.
You.
So I'm like, gorgeous, awesome, beautiful, all of that. So my daughter called me and she's like, Mom, you didn't wait for anyone to tell you you're beautiful and gorgeous? I said, no. Don't wait to do that, because that's waiting for people to define you. Look at yourself and know that you are beautifully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely. Did you happen to see those Facebook pictures?
No,
She would have had some comments, I know.
no, I didn't see them.
So, talking about Facebook, I think that's another good topic to touch on, which is social media and media in general. Because one of the things that as women, whether we're young women, different age range women, let's call it, sometimes we're looking at all of the billboards, the magazines, the social media with all of the filters that get put on there.
That's
and
right.
so we start to judge ourselves and start to chip away at our own self-esteem because of these images that we are seeing. And whether these images are of a very thin person or a more robust person, they are touched up. We know this, right? So when
That's
you
right.
see some of these models that all of a sudden get caught in candid pictures, you're like, oh, so that's what she really looks like. So I bring that up because self-esteem, again, should be based on your own definition of your self-worth, not what all of the companies out there that are trying to get you to buy their products. And by the way, influencers are trying to get you to buy a product as well, which is the likes and all of the things that that they are promoting that they want you to buy. So whether it's a great vacation or it's, an article of clothing, self-esteem, self-worth should be defined by you, not by all the social media out there, which we all know is, for the most part, all filtered.
That's
Sandra,
right.
from a practitioner's perspective, what do you think in terms of self-esteem and all of the things that we have targeting ourselves out there?
I think it's important that, as you all have said, we define ourselves. The thought that comes to my mind is we like to say we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. You cannot love your neighbor if you don't love yourself.
That's right.
Yes.
And I think growing up, because I grew up in the church and we defined ourselves as we related to our faith, it gave us value. Because if Christ died for me, I am valuable. And none of us created ourselves.
Right.
So we're all created in God's image. He loves variety. Only twins and even identical twins have a little something that's different.
Yes.
But most of us are different. And you look at God's creation, it's fearfully and wonderfully made. And to our listeners, go read Psalm 139 and understand that God designed you just the way you are.
That's right.
In beauty. To God, you're beautiful. And you need to look in the mirror and see beauty because God made you. And if God made you, He doesn't make any rubbish. He makes beauty. And you need to define who you are because of who God made you to be, and not because of social media, not because of enemies and people who want to put you down. You are beautiful. I don't care if you're fat. I don't care if you're skinny. I don't care if you have breasts. I don't care if you don't have breasts. I don't care if you have behind or no behind. What the situation is, whether guys like you or guys don't like you, you are beautiful. And growing up, self-respect gives you self-esteem. How do you value yourself?
Exactly.
What will give you more value? And as you look at those concepts, you begin to feel positive and confident in yourself. I have a son who was born with a deformity. And I remember when he was a little boy, and we prepared him before he was among his friends. We told him, you laugh first. We told him, they're going to laugh at you and they're going to make fun of you. And you tell him, God made me this way and I have nothing to do with this. This was God's doing. And I said, before they start laughing at you, and if they pick on you and they're laughing, you laugh more. Because you are handsome, you're gorgeous, you're a prince. You were designed by God this way. And he did good. He did very well until there was an unfortunate situation in elementary school where they were playing football and one of the kids' foot caught him in his face. And he said to me, Mom, I expected people to make fun of me, but not a teacher.
Oh.
That was devastating. And I don't think the teacher meant to make fun of him, but he perceived it that way. And the teacher was frightened because a foot had caught him in his face and his impediment was in his face. And the teacher reacted spontaneously, but my son perceived it as a put down. And he was pretty hurt by it. And it was some years later, as he was finishing up high school, that he went through radical surgery. But my son grew up as a prince. I always told him, you're a prince, deformity or not. And to this day, he knows his worth. Sometimes we had to tell him, bring it down a little bit, son. That's not self-confidence. That's a little bit of arrogance there. So temper it a little bit. And I have to say that with God's working in his life, he has found a better place of not being too arrogant and not being too egotistical, and still he knows his value as a prince. And I think all our girls are princesses and all our boys are princes. And if we as family members treat our children with value, they grow up with value.
Yes.
That famous poem, children live what they learn.
Yes.
So if we teach our children to live with grace, they'll become gracious. If we teach our children they're valuable, they'll begin to have self-esteem. We don't put our kids down. We encourage them. Don't call your kids names. Don't call them stupid and say things like that. They're not stupid. They're learning. They're curious. Sometimes parents speak to children the way their parents spoke to them. So we invite you as adults to think twice before you speak to your children and to elevate. Let's spend our time lifting up our children, lifting up our young women, lifting up your wives, lifting up your men. Let me just put it right out there. I do not like the bashing of men. There are so many things that try to make men look like they're inferior or they don't know what they're doing. Men are awesome. We need them to work in partnership with us. And I really don't like men bashing. I not like it.
I completely agree with you.
Because they have self-esteem issues also.
Yes.
And I think we need to let our men know how valuable they are, how much they're needed, how much they are a part of the team, even when we're very strong women.
Yes. Well, I think when you strip it all away, it boils down to respect.
Respect.
It's self-respect, respect of others,
Right.
respect of the men in our lives, the women in our lives. And you touched on something which I thought just triggered a memory for me, which is what we say to our children. And I remember my sister and I had just had our first babies. And one of us, I don't remember which one of us it was, we were at our grandparents' house. And I think one of us said it to her son, who was just a few months old, and we were like, "Oh, gordo," which in Spanish it's gordo in Spanish for English translation means fat, but it's in our culture for so many years has been used as a term of endearment. Right? So it's not meant in a bad way.
Oh, okay.
And so, "Oh, gordo, come here," right? And my grandfather stopped us, and he said, "Please don't ever use that to call your child or to name your child." And we were like perplexed because it is something that's used, gordo and gorda, in our culture. And he said, "What you don't understand is that what you are calling him, while is a term of endearment, as life goes on, that child may carry that with them and feel otherwise."
Right.
So he said, child has a name. You could call the child a name or something that later in life will not have a negative connotation. So for example, so now I if I refer to my daughter, I'll say sunshine. And my son, I'll say sunshine with the O instead of the U, right? So that's the way we differentiate. So it's so important. And it was something that we didn't even think of as young mothers.
Right.
But my grandfather was wise enough to say, what you say to them, even at this young age, matters.
It matters.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say that we cannot wait until they become teenagers
Exactly.
to start giving them saying good things to them and lifting their spirits. We need to tell them that from a child, so it would be embedded in them. That's why the Bible says, train up a child also.
Exactly.
So, and another thing that I want to touch on, we also have to teach our children that they are worth more than the outward appearance.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
what inside that will radiate on the outside.
Yes.
You know, so if you feel good about yourself on the inside, you will look beautiful on the outside.
Right.
Yes.
And I think we need to, as parents, we need to censor social media, because children can be very unkind to other children on social media. And we know the history. We have seen it in the news of children who commit suicide because they have been bullied and belittled and unkind things said. So parents need to cut out the social media for children so they are not exposed to these elements of negativity and hostility. And if a child comes across that, to tell the parent so it can be addressed. You know, you talked about respect, and the good book, The Golden Rule, do unto others as you'd have them do to you. So don't say to anybody anything that you wouldn't want somebody to say to you.
Exactly.
Treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you have suffered abuse, if you have gone through these kinds of behaviors that make you feel less than, remember how it made you feel and change the storyline so that the next person, so as our dear Dr. Betsy would say, reframe it,
Exactly.
reframe it, and therefore pay it forward in a positive way so that we can help the next generation to be positive and to feel good about themselves. And we're here to help anyone who is, you know, I think of young wives who may be in relationships where they feel less than or not valued. You have women sitting here who are willing to walk beside you and mentor you and help you to find your value. So please don't hesitate to make contact with us, which Laura will tell you in a few minutes how to contact us.
Yes. And one of the things that I want to also touch on is that just because you may not have a great self-esteem doesn't mean you can't get great self-esteem. Remember, it's what we tell ourselves, and we're not just up here preaching because we've been up here, have lived it, right? So I went through life saying, "Oh my gosh, I got my big bottom from my, Cuban side of the family," and I've come to embrace my big bottom.
That's right.
There's some people that want to go out and get big bottoms, right?
No, they're buying the big booty. Yeah.
So you can really turn something that, instead of waking up in the morning and going to the mirror and saying, "Oh my gosh, I look horrible today," what do you say? "I look amazing today.
Amazing, that's right.
I am beautiful." And, talking about how God, made everything perfect. When we look at a bouquet of flowers, that bouquet of flowers is made up of so many different types of textures and shapes and colors, and every single flower is different, yet we still call it beautiful. So why can't we embrace who we all are, for our similarities, for our differences, and say we are God's bouquet of flowers made in human form, and we are beautiful?
Very well said. And I personally cannot imagine living in a world where all I'm seeing is Sandra, or all I'm seeing is Laura. Okay? Skin tone. I want to see diversity. It's all the diversity among us that make this world a beautiful place.
Absolutely.
Yes. I am beautiful. You are beautiful. We all are beautiful.
And all of you are beautiful too. We would love, this topic was brought on through our audience. We'd love to hear what you would like to hear when you tune in to Global Women Enrichment Podcast. So please feel free, reach out to us and let us know at gwenrichment.com. Till next time.